You're listening to the Elevate Podcast, and I'm your host, Robert Glazer. Join me as I talk to world-class performers about how they build their capacity and reach greater heights in leadership, business, and life, and how you can do the same. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. Our quote for today is from Jeff Bezos. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Our guest today, Rory Vaden, is the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, a firm that helps clients identify their voice, tell their story, and share their unique message. He's a world-class speaker who has competed in the World Championship of Public Speaking. He's given a TEDx Talk, How to Multiply Time, which has been viewed over 4 million times. And he's also the New York Times bestselling author of 3 books, Take the Stairs, Procrastinate On Purpose, and his newest one, Wealthy and Well Known, that publishes the day this episode releases. And then he's going to talk to us about and is also available to our listeners in audiobook for free. So Rory, welcome back to the show and thanks for joining a second time.
Yeah, Bob. Thanks for having me, man. Always good to be with you.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks. We were together in person, so we'll make a habit of it here. We dug into your background a bit on your first appearance, which people should check out. It's episode 139. Come a long way since then. But I want to start with the great story you have about how you found your first extremely valuable mentor when you were around college age. So can you share that story and the advice he kind of gave you?
Oh, yeah. So the first time I ever saw a public speaker, I was actually in 6th grade at Platt Middle School, which is true story. I went to PMS. That was my middle school, PMS. And we had all the hormones flying around. But that was the first time that I thought, man, how do you become a speaker? And then when I was in college, there was a gentleman who spoke at this, I was in a direct sales company working there in the summers to pay my way through school.
Where were you? Were you in the Cutco Mafia too?
It was not Cutco. No,
right.
No, we were selling educational kids books.
Okay.
But it was door to door, was 14 hours a week or 14 hours a day, 80 hours a week, straight commission and knocking on doors. We had to knock on doors to find a place to live. I mean, we took cold showers every morning. It was very intense. And so they brought in motivational speakers to like keep us pumped up. And this guy, Eric Chester, walks out on stage and he was magnificent. I mean, he was hilarious and he was insightful and inspiring and all the things. And he mentioned in his speech that he had a son that was a student at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And that was the campus that I was recruiting on. So that was like my territory for recruiting students. And so I went up to him afterwards and I said, gosh, Mr. Chester, like one day my dream is to do what you do. But right now I just need your son's phone number because I'm going to recruit him and I want him to come with me. And so I got to know Eric a little bit and he made a pact. He said, if you personally mentor my son and make sure he doesn't get kidnapped or like, something happened to him that's terrible in this summer program. After this is all over, I will mentor you. And so I did that. I worked with his son, Zach, for a couple years. We had a great time. We lived together. He was a great guy. And then when I finished graduate school, Eric took me up, I took him up on his end of the bargain. And I remember, Bob, we sat down the first time at our very first meeting. And Eric was like a former bodybuilder. So he's this huge, like muscular man. And, I was raised by a single mom. So I'm like, pretty boy, mama's boy over here. And Eric said to me, he said, look, I know I agreed to do this, but I want you to know that I don't like mentoring people because I don't like working with others. I'm a lone wolf. Okay. I work best by myself. And he says, I'm only going to mentor you if you do exactly what I tell you to do. And I said, yeah, sir, yes, sir. Absolutely, Mr. Chester. You tell me like what to do. I will do whatever you say. And he said, okay, well, the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 presentations. I want you to go out and deliver 1,000 presentations. That's the first objective. And that's what started me on the career, right? So I spoke 304 times for free, made it to the World Championship twice in my early 20s. We then built an 8-figure business. First company was a sales coaching company. We put on these huge events. And then my TED Talk went viral. My first book hit the New York Times. And then when I was 37, Mr. Chester actually was the one who inducted me into, I became the youngest professionals in history, in the U.S. history, to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Professional Speaking Hall of Fame. And, I'm really excited, Bob, to go back to Eric and find out what is step 2 of the journey. So it's
seems like he got the better deal out of this.
Yeah, he
out
did.
of this trade. Well, I have a couple things to that. And you made me think of your validating a discussion I had. So years ago, I gave a presentation at a conference, and it was for first time people to that conference. It was an industry conference, and it had, and in this conference there was a lot of sort of nepotism with the founders. People just got up there and were talking about stuff, and I don't know, my session had like a 4.8 out of 5, and so I pitched to do it again the next time. And look, there's always first time people at a conference, and the feedback I got from the sort of owner manager was, "Hey, this is like the same presentation as last time," and I was like, "Yeah," because like I know what worked and it was good, and I made some tweaks, and like again, it's meant to go to the 100 people that are new, and and I realized like I think this is just something people don't realize. Sometimes you're disappointed when you see a really great speaker for the second time, because you realize it's a performance. They've worked on it. When they say, "And the guy in the back knows what I'm talking about," and laughs, but that's sort of what makes that impact. It's just a lot of practice. And I probably do a new track every couple of years tied to a book, and it's not great the first 4, 5, 10 times. It gets much better as you get feedback from the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I've been at this a long time, and I would say I pretty much have 3 keynotes. I've been doing this since I was 17, but any of those 3 will bring the house down. I mean, people will be laughing hysterically. They'll be inspired. Like, they'll learn things that they've never heard before, but I only have 3 of them. But the same is true for like comedians, right? I mean, we see Jerry Seinfeld or Ellen DeGeneres up there cranking out jokes, and it looks like it's off the cuff. They've done that joke hundreds of times.
In fact, I just heard that it was Chris Rock, or I can't remember who it was, or Dave Chappelle, or one of them had a thing where he goes to this local club for like 3 weeks and just tries stuff and sees what people, and then takes it a little bigger, and then takes it on the road after he's crowd tested it. And it's not like it comes out of the box that way.
No, it's not. So Jerry Seinfeld actually made a documentary called Comedian, which they followed him doing this at different small comedy clubs. And so, today at Brand Builders Group, we don't just work with speakers. That's a big part of what we do. We work with personal brands, which is really executives or entrepreneurs or experts, anyone who's an expert to build their personal brand. Some of them want to be speakers. Some of them want to create info products. Most of the clients, literally about 57% of the people in our program, aren't creating a new offering at all. They're just using their personal brand to drive traffic and awareness to their existing company, to the thing that they're already doing. But whether it's speaking or writing is the same way. Like, excellence is never an accident. There's a thing in writing that I don't know who said this, but I found this to be so true. They say there is no such thing as a great writer. There is only such a thing as great editors.
Yeah.
Like, it always comes out as junk. It always comes out as garbage, and then you have to clean it up. So it is that practice.
Make it bad, make it better. Well, you said, so you gave these hundreds of free speeches, and at some point, I think, I've heard you say you were described as one of the world's best kept secrets. We hear that term a lot. Why is that a bad thing?
Yeah, that's not a compliment, right? I mean, because here's the thing. When people hear Brand Builders Group and they go personal brand strategy firm, a lot of times their mind goes to like vanity things, like vanity metrics or colors and logos and fonts. And they're like, "Oh, you guys help people with like grow their social media following and become famous." It's like, no, it's not about vanity. It's about humanity. It's about service. What we do is we help people who are experts become more well-known. And the reason this matters to your question is, I mean, imagine if somebody had the cure for cancer right now, like literally had it.
Yeah.
But because they were shy, or because they didn't like marketing, or they didn't like podcasting, or they weren't comfortable in front of a crowd, or they didn't have a budget, or they didn't like, they were too shy to tell anybody. Like, that would be such a disservice to the world to go, you have solved something that will help so many people and nobody knows about it. Like, that's a tremendous disservice. So we're working with what we call mission-driven messengers. These are people who they're not trying to be famous. They need to be well known, not because they need to be well known, but because the thing that they are an ambassador of, the thing that they are championing, that there's a problem that they have solved. No different than Mother Teresa solving, or being an advocate for poverty.
Right. She needed people to know about her work, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's just definitionally, because some people have heard this term, and we'll talk both to the people who are listening to this, I know, probably leading organizations and then leaders within the organizations. How do you define a personal brand? I guess you talked a little bit about what is it and what isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing about us is we're very data driven, right? So we have a data science team. And one of the very first things we did when we started this is we invested over $100,000 into a PhD-led, followed traditional academic rigor, a national research study, right? So, and we wanted to answer that question with data. And, there's a lot of data in the book, right? And again, we're giving away the audiobook for free today on this. So we'll share with people how to get that. But the short summary is this. Personal branding is simply the digitization of reputation. So when people hear personal branding, they tend to think like new things and technological things. And what actually the data points to, as does our experience corroborate, the word you really want to think of is reputation. Like, this isn't a new concept. This is an old concept. It's as old as time. And what matters is doing the same things you would do to build reputation offline is that you treat people the same way online. So it's like, you don't have to understand personal branding. If you understand reputation, then you can do personal branding right. If you don't understand reputation, you're going to do personal branding all wrong. And so it's really about building trust. We say automating trust at scale. So the only difference is leveraging the tools of the day to extend your reach without adding more time to your calendar. And that's what it's really about, right? And that's what we say, it's mission-driven messengers. It's about service. It's about going, what problem can I solve? How can I be useful to other people? And it's not just about vanity or followers or going viral. But your business does benefit tremendously. Again, there's some data points on this that drive the empirical metrics of a business. The things that matter most are directly impacted by the executives having personal brands.
Well, I'm going to dive into the mechanics of this in a sec, but I actually wanted to maybe have you also tell a little bit the BBG origin story, because it's similar. I always say, like, it's very hard to give up good for great, right? And I see a lot of people at the time, they lose their job, they get thrown out, they fire a partner. It seems like the end of the world. And at the time, and people are in that stage now, but actually they kind of needed that in order to get great. And if we're willing to give up bad or okay for a shot at great, but it's much harder to give up good. But I've seen a lot of people struggle with that. But tell about the origin story of how you and your wife even came to start this business, because I think it might resonate with people.
Yeah, well, so to understand the origin story of Brand Builders Group, we have to go back briefly to our first company. So my wife and I met as business partners in our first business. And we had a mutual friend in college, and the three of us decided to start a company with one other person when we were in our early 20s. So we grew that business to 8 figures. We had a couple hundred people on our team. We had 5,000 clients. And everybody was winning. Like, we were making money, clients were making money, our team was making money, shareholders were making money. Like, life was good, but it was intense. Like, we worked, it was a very hard driving culture. And effectively, one day we walked into what we thought was a routine finance meeting. And a few weeks earlier, my wife had been asked for her opinion on sort of the direction of the company. And my wife, AJ, she is a redhead. And she's passionate. Some would call it opinionated, but she's very direct, and she doesn't mince her words. And she told them exactly what she felt. And then a couple weeks later, we walked into a meeting that we thought was routine, and they said, "Today is your last day. Your services will no longer be needed." And we had started that company from scratch, cold calling out of the Yellow Pages phone book, literally like ripped the phone book into fourths and physically had yellow pages in our hands.
Phone book for everyone under 30 is a thing that used to get printed, and it was yellow or white and had phone numbers in it. Yeah.
Exactly. And
your kids sat on it when they were younger, more importantly, to get a little boost at the table.
So she got fired, and not just her, there were 2 other female executives that also got fired. There was a lot of stuff going on, but anyways, these 3 women got fired, and I knew that was not the right thing, right? I believed that wasn't the right thing. And, I resigned. And so our entire business, our income went to zero. Our team was gone. All of our social media, our podcast, our customer list, our email database was all owned by the company. And so it all disappeared overnight. And literally, like within the same week, like within a few days, I got a phone call from somebody I hadn't talked to in a couple of years. And it was a gentleman named Lewis Howes. And I had met Lewis when my first book came out. My first book was called Take the Stairs. I was interviewed on this up and coming podcast called The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes. And I thought Lewis was really cool. And I thought, I was like, man, I really like him. We're the same age. And I said, hey, you should write a book one day. And he's like, man, I'm thinking about it. And I was like, oh, well, let me just share with you everything we just learned, like everything we just did as a first time, no name author, like broke as a joke to go, how did we pull off hitting the New York Times? And, it was all this sales strategy. And Lewis hit New York Times with that book, and our friendship was forged. Well, fast forward a couple years go by, we lost touch. I didn't really need anything from him. He didn't need anything from me.
And he calls you that week, proving that life gives you what you need sometimes, not necessarily what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm supposed to call you. And my business has grown a lot. So he had grown from about 8 million downloads when I had been on the podcast to a few years later, about 30 million. And so that was like 8 years in. He had like 30 million downloads on his podcast. And he just said, I feel like I need your brain on my business. I'm spread thin. I'm generating a lot of revenue. I'm not keeping much of the profit. I'm being asked to do all these things. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. And I just, could I spend a couple days with you? And it was like, well, calendar's wide open.
Yeah. Let me check. How's Thursday?
But, we didn't have a company or anything. So he came to our house and we were like in the basement of our house with a flip chart, just like asking him questions and mapping out stuff. And then he said, this is the 2 of the most powerful days I've ever had in business. And he said, this is what you were born to do. This is your new business. And we're like, whoa. No, like this is not our new business. We don't have a business. We don't have a team. We don't have technology. We don't even have a checking account. And we certainly don't have an audience. But Lewis said, well, that's okay. I have one. And I'm going to bring you on my show. And you're going to tell everybody all the stuff you just told me about how to build a personal brand. And I'm going to tell the whole world. And we're going to start working together. And so we started working with Lewis. And over the next couple years, his podcast grew from 30 million downloads to 500 million.
And a big reason of that, what you told him, talk a little bit about the focus and then we'll dig in a little bit into Sheehan's wall concept. But what was he doing beforehand? And then his decision to give up all of that was really what changed everything for him, right?
Yeah, he was doing what a lot of people do, which is too much, too many things. One of the things that we say is, multiple streams of income is what everybody hears about. And it's the stupidest piece of financial advice on the internet. Like, I have 7 private clients who are billionaires with a B, right? I've been around a lot of wealthy people, and we've now built 2 8-figure companies, right? We're not the richest people in the world, but like I'm a long way from the trailer park that I was born in, raised by a single mom. And like nobody who got rich from multiple streams of income. Like everybody who got really, really rich, they got rich from doing one thing super duper well.
Right. And that's true for companies, right? A lot of times you see like just any business. And I always say like before 10 million in revenue, or particularly a service company, like do this one thing and get known for it. And then you can add, but you get yourself really diluted early on.
Yeah. And that's one of our flagship mantras is if you have diluted focus, you get diluted results. That line comes all the way from my first book, Take the Stairs. Like that was even before we started a personal branding business. It was just like, that's just in general going, how are we not seeing this? And, in Lewis's case, he had 17 revenue streams. We took him through this exercise that we take everyone through called the revenue streams assessment. And we list out every revenue stream on the wall, and we measure things like how long you've been doing it, what's the growth rate, how stressful is it, how life-giving is it, how much natural momentum is there, and it spits out this score. And this podcast thing that he was doing, he barely even viewed it as a revenue stream. He viewed it as
because it wasn't as big as revenue at the time.
No, not even close. It was more like a traffic source to the other things he was doing, which is what a podcast is for most people. For most people, it's not a business model, it's a traffic source, and us included, right? Like our podcast is decently sized, but it's not enough that we can run a huge business off of it. So it just drives leads. But for someone like Lewis, I mean, honestly, the only thing I ever did for Lewis, I think that was any value. And I didn't even tell him to do this. I just asked the question. I said, it seems like all the momentum is with the podcast. What if you shut down all this other stuff and just went all in on the podcast?
And you never expected him to say yes, right?
Yeah, I know. And he, it was to his credit. I mean, he shut down multi-seven figures in revenue and he went all in. It does apply to big businesses and small businesses. We've had this experience in our first company. We shut down a $2 million division, and 4 years later, the company quadrupled. We've done this.
We had that experience. We had launched a new company was smaller. We had launched sort of a new division, and that division was growing 30 or 40, 50%, but it was like 5% of the revenue. And all the attention was taking away from the bread and butter. And actually, when we stopped doing it, the acceleration rate in the core business was tremendous. And so everyone hears this advice. You and I know a lot of entrepreneurs. I'll tell you, a lot of times they have a little bit of ADD, and I'll talk to them. Oh, great. I've got brand builders group, and then I started brand whatever group, and then I started whatever group, and then I check back in a year, and the new two things are falling apart, and the core business is hard. I've just seen that movie so many times.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you think about this like as a visual, if you've got 10 units of resource, okay, so whatever those are, it's time, team, talent, technology, capital, prayer, like whatever your units of resource are, okay? And every company has some number of units of resource, but let's just say you had 10.
Yeah.
And if you have 10 initiatives going, then on average, each initiative gets 1 unit of resource.
Yeah.
If all you do is stack all 10 units of resource on one initiative, the likelihood of that one initiative succeeding goes up exponentially because you're competing against a world where everyone takes 10.
It's the domino. It's the domino effect. Yeah.
It's a domino, and it's the law of the...
Do you know the number? How many dominoes would it take? Each domino can knock down a domino 50% bigger than it, right? If they're all in a line because of momentum. How many real dominoes with that logic does it take to knock down the Empire State Building?
Yeah, I think this is in the book, The One Thing by J. Pop, isn't it? It's not very many. It's
29. I've asked it in a speaking, and sometimes people say 1, and I'm like, it can't be 1. Because I said it's a real domino. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't have to be any smarter. You don't have to even work any more efficiently. You just put all of your best resources on fewer initiatives, and the likelihood of those succeeding goes way up. So if you have diluted focus, you get diluted results. So it's not about diversification. It's about concentration, particularly in the beginning.
And this goes, so we'll dive directly into the new book, Wealthy and Well-Known, which I think, again, anyone, whether you're a company leader or you're someone in a company whose profile is growing in visibility, it's got things that can help you, particularly, and I think about this concept in terms of someone at a company. But can you explain Sheehan's Wall? Because I heard you speak, I heard you talk about this, and this really was kind of a major aha for me. And I think it applies to the company and a company leader. It applies to someone in a company in terms of what they're really known for. And I think it's the opposite of focus, right? I mean, it is doing this is the opposite of a lack of focus in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, and by the way, you mentioned this earlier. So we're giving away my new book for free on audio. So if you're an audiobook listener, if you just go to freebrandAudiobook.com/elevate, you can get it for free right now. So freebrandAudiobook.com/elevate will give you the whole book for free on audio. But one of the core concepts that you just referenced, Bob, is called Sheehan's Wall. And by the way, we named this after a colleague of mine named Peter Sheehan. So he actually taught me the origin of this concept in a more corporate environment. And we've since adapted it to personal brands, but it applies to both. But basically, if you think about in any market, in any industry, in any geography, there's two different groups of people. There are those who are unknown. They're struggling with obscurity, right? They're unclear, they're untrusted, they're not recognizable, they're unknown.
And this can be within an organization too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And then on the other side of the wall are the people who are well-known, right? They have notoriety, they're recognizable, right? When we say the book title is Wealthy and Well-Known, this is what we're talking about, is becoming well-known, not like famous, just well-known for your trade. So between these two groups is this giant wall that we call Sheehan's Wall, because we named it after Peter. And basically, the people who are unknown, what they tend to do is they look at the people who are well-known and they think to themselves, oh, I'm gonna do all the things that they do. So they look at like Gary Vaynerchuk, who talks about all these different topics, right? He talks about music and sports and entertainment and Web3 and cryptocurrency and wine and, like social media.
Right. So the answer must be do a lot of things. That's what they see. Yeah.
Talk a lot about a lot of topics. Or they'll look at like The Rock, right? Like Dwayne Johnson, and they go, oh man, like this guy has so many revenue streams. Like he owns a football team. He owns a sports drink. He owns a tequila brand. He owns a clothing line. Now he has men's facial products, and he's a comedian and he's an actor. And they're like, oh, I guess I need to have multiple streams of income. And then, you're on all the different platforms, like trying to go, oh, I need to be on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Right. And most people, right. It's interesting. You find most people nail one of those. Even when you spread across all of them, they're really hard. It's hard to do one right. Yeah.
It's hard to do one right. And so that's what happens is you bounce off the wall. And if you literally think of a wall, right? If you think about swinging a sledgehammer and trying to knock down a wall, like if you hit all these different spots on the wall, nothing's going to happen to that wall. Like it's going to take forever to knock that wall down. But if you hit the same spot over and over and over, eventually the paint chips, and then there's a crack, and then there's a divot, and then you carve out a little hole, and then you punch through. And when you punch through and you pull back, the entire wall comes crashing down. And that's how every wealthy person got wealthy. They got wealthy through one thing first. It was concentration first.
And then they used that leverage and that awareness. Again, you're a famous athlete, and then you launch a perfume line and people buy it. Like it doesn't work, right?
But even entrepreneurs, it's like Elon Musk, people are like, well, he has all these companies. But in the beginning, Elon Musk made his money from PayPal. Jeff Bezos made his money from Amazon. Like Sarah Blakely made her money from Spanx. Like Jamie Kern-Lima made her money from It Cosmetics. It wasn't like they had 50 different things going on. They had one thing going on. And so that's a lot of times when executives or entrepreneurs hear us talking about personal brand, one of the mistakes they made, Bob, is they think like, oh, this guy's going to teach me how to make courses or like become a coach or a consultant. We can help people do that, but that's our actual default strategy is to go, no, the reason to build your personal brand is that the fastest path to cash, the fastest way to monetize a personal brand is to drive traffic and awareness to the thing you're already doing. Right. So don't think of it as like, oh, I'm going to become, Mel Robbins and I'm going to launch a podcast and it's going to take me away from my day job. Think of it more like Richard Branson or more like Elon Musk going, I'm using my personal brand to drive awareness to my company.
Well, that's an interesting case study in itself because, you attach it really tightly like Elon, you then got to be really careful about how you use that and, attacking your core buyer constituency doesn't seem like, I don't have a branding company, but that doesn't seem like something I would offer in my consulting services.
No, it's not. But here is the thing that's interesting about that. It shows you how much people respond to a person.
They tie how much the product is tied to the person. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So Elon, recently would be, call it a negative example, at least from financial performance. And that's happened to him a few times, right? He smoked weed on Joe Rogan's show and like they took a huge hit, but it comes back. But the flip side is true. So coming back to the data in our study, right? So we asked Americans like these questions. So 82% of Americans agree that companies are more influential if their founder or executives have an established personal brand. 82% of people say that. 58% of Americans said they would be willing to pay more money to receive services from people who have personal brands, even if they don't work at a company. It's like pretty compelling. 67%, here's another one. 67% of Americans said they would be willing to spend more money on products and services that come from the companies whose founders have personal brands that align with their personal values. So what you're talking about is an example of the negative, right? You do something that doesn't align with my values, it costs you. But people say, I mean, the data proves that people are more likely to recommend you, buy from you, they're more likely to work for you, and they're more likely to pay more money for the services you provide if the executives of that company have personal brands that people recognize. It's like we trust people more than we trust companies, and it has a nature.
Yeah, and when that's I mean, look, that's the whole influencer world, and now you're talking about corporate influencers and outside. So let me ask you, I think people get it. We'll just use Acme company. The Acme sells to the customer, and the CEO is very public. What does it look like for a CEO of a B2B company, right? Where the customers are not the end consumers, it's not marketing. They sell some sort of wholesale distribution thing. What does the brand sort of look like, and how does it speak to people differently, maybe in a B2B world than in a B2C world?
Are you saying? Are you asking like what should they do to build their personal brand? Or are you saying like how does it apply?
How does it apply? It seems a little different, right? I think people who are leading like Elon Musk or Nike or like a direct to consumer brand feel like they have to speak directly to the end customer or audience, with their brand. In the B2B world, it's a little bit different. A lot of times you don't even know who the leader is. You don't even know their name. Does it look different in there when you think about your brand? Or
I think in some ways it could, right? Like there's definitely an argument. Like if you're in that expert category, speaker, author, coach, consultant, right? We do work with some probably 30% of our clients are in that category.
Yeah.
And you go, that's more of like, okay, I'm trying to create a transaction. But on the executives and the entrepreneurs, more of that B2B side, it's more of like, okay, again, 61% of people say they're more likely to trust a company or organization if the founder has a personal brand. So you go, it matters to the extent that trust matters, right? The higher the requirement for trust in your business, the more important having an established personal brand becomes. So it's going, do you want your vendors to trust you? Do you want your employees to trust you? Do you need, we even see this with people who are raising capital, right? It's like your ability to source deals, your ability to source investors for a new division or a new company or whatever. It's again, if you think personal brand, the brain tends to go to like influencers and dancing and pointing on TikTok, and it goes a little haywire. If you think reputation, and you go, all I'm doing here is building my reputation digitally. I'm just taking my offline.
Maybe this company is known, like everyone at this company gets back to people in 24 hours and they're responsive, and that becomes the reputation, right, that the company is known for.
Yeah, and just known at all, right? Like there's nothing more frustrating than like trying to talk to a human at a company and feeling like there's no humans there, and like all you get is robots, and I'm not connected to anybody, and I can't get a hold of anybody. It's different if I can like see the founder or an executive on LinkedIn, and I can read their post, even if it's like, here's what we did with our kids over Father's Day, or like, here's my favorite baseball team.
Right. And more, and in the world of AI, I think even like more important than ever, I think being human and having real connection, people are going to believe so much is fake that's going to be even more important.
Yes. Yeah. Amen, Bob. And I used to think it was so stupid and trivial to be like, why would someone post a picture of what they were eating for lunch, right? Like, why do we care who your favorite sports team is? And yet, every single person will tell you the most engagement you get on any post is the ones about your kids, or the ones about your dog, or your birthday, or whatever. And it's also because, like, if you think about The Rock, right? Like I happen to be a fan of The Rock, and I'm just like, I kind of do wonder, what does The Rock eat in a given day, right? So when he posts a picture of 100 sushi rolls, I'm like, I'm totally fascinated by that. And to your point about AI, absolutely, right? We're starving.
You're not going to outthink the machines. So you might as well do what you can possibly do better, right?
Out-human, right? Like lean into being more human.
So let's talk about, again, there are a lot of CEOs, company leaders listening to this. Let's talk about, there's also a lot of up and coming kind of high level company leaders. You and I have seen some great, I don't know, just use Salesforce or some companies where like the sales leader has a great brand, or here's how we help companies and the thing or otherwise. I assume some people find it a little tricky where they're an up and comer at a company. They want to build their personal brand as sort of an expert in whatever their function is or the industry is, which is ostensibly helpful to the company. I've seen some of these personal brands that are aligned to what the company does, and ones that aren't too. And not that they're going against it, but their personal passion and the things that they care about or are talked a lot about. When does it become sort of an asset in your career, an asset that someone wants to bring you along because you have that? Or when does it a little threatening to the people you work with? And let's just say, again, my example, you're I don't know, you're a rock star marketing person for a company, but you train puppies on the side. And people at your company are seeing you constantly talk about puppies and this, and you're puppy expert. And they're like, oh, I don't feel like, do we have her full attention at work? I feel like there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's some landmines too. So how should people think about their personal brand and where it's portable and an asset, and where it's an asset or a liability for their current company? And I know that was 20 questions in one, so you can peel that apart.
Yeah, but it's an important question, and it's a tough question. And I don't think companies are doing a great job. I think in many ways companies are scared of the personal brand.
Correct.
And I think if companies embrace some of this data and formalized, I think some of this kind of training and things, I think they could benefit a lot more. Because look, if someone's going to leave your company, they're going to leave your company either way, right? So pretending like they're not doing it or trying to hold them back from doing it, I don't think is the thing. Here's the tip of your question that I think was really sharp, is going, when is it a threat? And I think this is the question that both companies and individuals need to understand. And I think you answered your own question. I think a company starts to view a personal brand as a threat the moment you start monetizing your message in some way other than through the company, right? And
that's
that
a great distinction. Yeah.
If you and I are business partners, but I'm making money on the side doing this thing, there's immediately just a breakdown of trust, right? The same as if you're my boss and I'm your employee and I'm like doing this thing over here, making money on the side, there's a breakdown of trust.
Versus I'm winning the hot shot, top finance, up and coming finance person in the world, smartest finance whiz, like all of these things that tie to the company, right? And bring attention to the company. And they're portable. You could obviously use those to get another job, but they're supporting what the company does, right?
That's right. I think that's where it becomes a threat, is when you start moonlighting, right? You're monetizing outside. Even at Brand Builders Group, all of my speaking income, all of my author royalties, they all flow into the company. And the first thing.
So you don't have your employees, like, what is your policy on sort of gig or otherwise? I'm curious. We never talked about this. Yeah. Do you have an official policy on that?
Well, basically, it's going, okay, if you're an employee and you're a full-time employee and we're paying you a salary and all that sort of stuff, right? It's going, you represent Brand Builders Group first and foremost, just like me, right? Yeah. The number one thing in my bio and on my, profiles are co-founder of Brand Builders Group. On the cover of the book, right? Like it says right across the top, co-founder of Brand Builders Group. So this is as a team, we're working together as a team, right? So, but what happens is in our world, we're in the world of like speaking, consulting, and coaching and stuff, right? So we're feeding our employees, coaching clients, but we have just a pay plan. We have a pay plan that says, hey, if you land a keynote, this is how we share in it. And they're on the same pay plan that I am. We're on the same pay plan. So I'll tell you roughly what it is, because it's different across specific things. But we figured this out. I figured this out in grad school. My MBA project was trying to figure out how to create like a financial structure. Yeah. So we do 35%. Okay. So more or less 40% goes to the person or persons delivering the work. Okay. So if it's a consulting gig, there could be 2 people on the project, could be 10 people on the project, could be 1 person. So we roughly carving out 30 to 40% for that. Then we roughly carve out around 10% for like the sales to the person or person
sales and marketing. Yeah.
Sold the thing.
Yeah.
And not just talked about the thing, but collected the agreement and the cash. Whoever got the deal signed and the money in the bank, 10% roughly for that. We then pay another 15%. Okay. So far we're at roughly 50, 40 for delivery, 10 for sales. We pay 15% to the person or persons who generated the lead.
The lead. Yeah.
Okay. So often there's at least a couple people involved there, and we parcel that up. And then that leaves 35% that goes to the company. The idea is we run the company on roughly 20%. And then we roughly make a 15% profit margin, which is a healthy company, which creates growth and opportunity for all of us.
Right. So you're putting that out there for everyone and they understand it.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, not I don't think every, big corporate enterprise is going to be able to apply something like that. But what I would say, if you're the young hotshot in the company, I would go, and here's the thing. If you have diluted focus, you get diluted results. If you're going to work at your company, work at your company. The best way to succeed in anything is to succeed in the previous thing you were doing, right? Crush it where you're at. There's a whole section in, again, my Take the Stairs book. This is from 15 years ago. That's like, crush it where you're at. Dominate the thing that you're doing. That is the fastest way to succeed at the next thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think if companies don't kind of like openly have a policy for this, then a lot of it happens in secret, and it sort of naturally sort of pushes them apart. But anyways, I think
I like, you made it simple. I think make your star rise, but it's rising with your company and it's pulling your company along and it's logically connected, right? And therefore you are increasing a portable asset, but it is not threatening and it's added to your company.
Bingo. And I would say that also if you're the founder of the company, that would be the same way. Like, in some ways, if you get into, we're getting deep into entrepreneurship here, but like if you look at the valuation of a company, the valuation of a company is basically inversely proportionate to the amount of risk. So the more dependency there is on the founder, the more risk there is, the lower.
Yeah, if you want to sell your company, you want to make people believe you're not important to it.
That's right. Yeah. So what happens is, but we know the data says that the closer your personal brand is tied to the company, the higher financial performance effectively in all these different categories you're going to experience. So how do we think about that? We think about it like launching a rocket, right? When you're launching a rocket, it takes every ounce of energy you can possibly muster together to get that thing
into
off the
orbit,
ground, into orbit.
And that's the highest risk. That's when things are at the highest risk too, right?
In the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning. Yeah.
So you're like, your personal brand is like the side booster, but then once it gets out into orbit, then you can peel off, that personal brand can peel off and the business can travel on its own. It actually does become its own thing.
Yeah.
But so in Brand Builders Group, we're a great case study of this because we use my personal brand to get it off the ground. And then we are systematically removing me from the day-to-day of the operations in the business.
Yeah.
Now, we're not planning on selling the company, but we do want it to run without us just the same.
I was going to ask you, but now I could probably answer the question using the same framework. We'll test it. So that person who's starting out, the 20-year-old in the company, trying to build up their brand within the company, I would assume it's like the Sheehan, like get known at Rory is the go-to person for X, right? Like it would seem like really become known for doing one thing really well. Is that the best thing you could do to build your internal brand?
Absolutely. And I would argue your external brand. You can start late on your external brand and go fast. Look what we did with Lewis, right? We theoretically, our external brand went to zero, but we had one relationship, and your relationships are really the irrefutable accelerant to success.
Right.
And you're going to build relationships by doing an excellent job at the thing you're already doing. So you want to be known as the expert, but you also want to be known for character traits like over-delivering, hard work, integrity, accuracy.
Right. You want everyone to use the same words to describe you, probably, right? Yeah.
Bingo.
Interesting.
And then if you step away or you get fired or some other opportunity comes along, it's going to come along because when AJ got fired and I resigned, we lost everything. Like it was all owned by the company. It all disappeared. Literally the contacts in our phone disappeared.
Right. So all you had left was your personal brand, really, at the end of the day, right?
Reputation.
Yeah, reputation.
Really, all we had was our reputation. And we didn't, by the definition of personal brand, the digitization, we didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
But we had our reputation. People trusted us. People knew what we were about. And that's because we were all in on the previous thing. And that catapulted the Brand Builders Group. It took us, we went from 0 to 8 figures in half the time in our second company with no debt and no investors and just the two of us as founders, and rebuilt the team, and now we're back up to like 50 people, a couple thousand clients. And, we work with some of the biggest authors and speakers in the world, John Maxwell and Ed Milet and Lewis Howes and, so forth and so on. And doctors, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Dr. Henry Cloud, like all these amazing people. And then also executives and entrepreneurs that you've never heard of, but they've built great businesses, and, they're building their personal brand alongside of it.
So you touched on this earlier, but I think people would be maybe surprised by your take on this, in that debunking the concept of a social media following being key to a strong personal brand, right? I think a lot of people go, if I have 1 million followers, like that's all I need. There's some messed up stuff these days too, where someone has 1 million followers because they do hair extensions, and then they try to use that to comment on political, Middle Eastern complex political, and it's just not what they're known for. But it's kind of a head fake, because people go, they have 1 million followers, like maybe they know what they're talking about. That seems like an example where you make a mess of your brand.
Yeah, well, actors have done that for years, right?
Correct.
And musicians and lots of people. But yes, the thing I would say is people massively overestimate the importance of a large social media following. It is really, okay, so here's the thing. So we have a lot of clients that are very well known, like Lewis and others. They have millions of followers, okay?
Yeah.
If you go, the formula for going viral is pretty simple. You have to create content that is interesting to everyone.
Yeah.
How do you create content that's interesting for everyone? Well, sometimes you doesn't even have the spoken word, because then you overcome the language barrier. The most viral,
you go to the lowest common denominator too.
You go to the lowest common denominator. You go to the thing that applies to everybody. It's pretty much politics, religion, money, health, or relationships. It's pretty much those things, and that applies to everybody. By definition, a word we would use in the business community is commoditization. You are applying in the most general way to the most general number of people. That is how you get lots of followers. That is the opposite of how experts get paid a lot of money. You get paid a lot of money. Or
companies get paid a lot of money.
And how companies get paid a lot of money. By being the go-to for a small number of people that you serve in a really deep way. Right?
So you subscribe to the 1,000 raving friends model?
Absolutely. So in fact, there's a technique that we teach in the book called fractal math. And again, you can get the audiobook for free, freebrandAudiobook.com/elevate. It's called fractal math. So here's how this works, Robert. So using 1,000, since you used 1,000. So let's say you have 1,000 customers who buy a $30 product. And you go, all right, what's the best way to double the revenue of the business? A lot of people would say, okay, easy, go get another 1,000 customers. And that would double the business.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's the wrong way to do it.
It's a way. Yeah.
It's definitely the hardest and most expensive way to double the revenue. Why? Because the most expensive customer is a brand new customer. Why? Because they don't yet trust you, and trust must always take place before there's a transaction. So new customers are the hardest and the most expensive to get. So you can do that. The other way to double your revenue is to go deep. And that's what fractal math is. So fractal math is a concept that says that 10% of your customers will invest at a level 10 times what they've already invested. So you take your 1,000 customers and we go 10% of that would be 100, and they will invest at a level 10 times more. So if they invested at 30 the first time, they'll invest at 300. So now you have 100 at 300, which is also 30,000. So now you doubled the revenue, didn't add a single customer. But it keeps going. So then you go, if you have 100 that gave you 300, 10% of that 100 is 10 people. That would give you 3,000. Now you added another 30,000 in revenue. Again, no new customers. And 10% of those people, so 10% of 10 is one person would give you 30,000. So you started with 1,000 that gave you $30. That's 30 grand. Then you got 100 that gave you 300. Then you 10 that gave you 3,000 and one that gave you 30,000. You quadrupled the revenue without adding a single customer. That is the fastest path to profit maximization, right? It's serving a smaller audience in a deeper way. Like that's really the key to making a lot of money quickly. You don't need millions of followers to make millions of dollars. Look at Brand Builders Group. Like we're healthy 8-figure business. Like we don't have even 100,000 followers, like on any platform. Many of our clients have millions and millions, but our business is much larger than most of them, if not all of them, because we serve a very specific mission-driven messenger, either an executive, an entrepreneur, or an expert in a very specific, deep way.
All right, last question. I'll modify this because I usually ask a personal and professional mistake you made. You probably answered it last time. What's the biggest branding mistake you think you've made that you learned from in your career?
Do you know my answer to this? Have you ever heard?
As I said it, I do know. It occurred to me it's the book, right?
Of mistitling my second book, right?
But there's a good learning in that for everyone.
Totally, yeah. So the short story is when my second book came out, my strategy was I was going to release a TED Talk and have the TED Talk go viral at the same time I launched the book, because this was like the golden era of TED Talks where Brene Brown and Adam Grant and Mel Robbins and Simon Sinek, they were all doing this. Like they were all, their TED Talk would blow up and then their book would blow up, right? Angela Duckworth. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I'm actually a speaker. You know, I know how to speak even more than I know how to write. So I did that and it almost worked. My TED Talk did go viral. It was called How to Multiply Time. But my second book is called Procrastinate On Purpose, doesn't sell worth a squat. Like even to this day, I think it sold like 15,000 units, which is not nothing, but it's a far cry from the hundreds of thousands of units that, you know, my first book has sold. And you go, well, what's the explanation? It's the same messenger, same exact content, released in the same moment in history. The difference is the title. And what we've learned is that clear is greater than clever. When it comes to titles, clear is greater than clever. I thought Procrastinate On Purpose was so clever. It was clever. I was like, I want a title that people have never heard of. I want something that is counterintuitive. I want something that is shocking. I want something that people will go, whoa, I don't even know what that means. And the good news is I achieved that goal. The bad news is nobody knows what it means, and so they don't buy it. But when TED asked me they didn't actually ask me for the title of the talk. They said, what is your talk about? And I said, oh, that's easy. It's about how to multiply time. And so we now operationalized this as one of the lessons that we teach in Wealthy and Well-Known. And by the way, Wealthy and Well-Known is meta, because this part of the title of this book is what we call the I want blank test. It is a great title, which you also could apply to a subject line in an email or to a headline of a website, should follow the I want blank test. You just have to figure out, you have to ask yourself the question, how would your perfect customer complete the sentence, I want blank? If your title or headline completes that phrase, I want blank, it's a great title, right? I want good to great. I want Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I want to think and grow rich. I mean, you don't even have to do anything. You can think and grow rich. Of course, the best title that we'll probably see in our lifetime, 4-hour work week, right? Yeah. I want a 4-hour work week. So that's part of why we called our second book this new book, Wealthy and Well-Known, because it's like our clients want to be wealthy and they want to be well-known. They don't want to be rich and famous. They just want to be wealthy and they want to be well-known. They want to semi-quietly be known by who it matters to be known by, but to make a real difference in the world.
All right, Rory, thanks for joining us. Where can people learn more about you, Brand Builders Group? And we'll include the URL. I think you gave it a few times, and it's freeaudiobook.com/elevate, right?
Almost, not quite. It's freebrandAudiobook.com/elevate. And I would just say, go there. I mean, like our story's in there. I mean, it's free, right? So freebrandAudiobook.com/elevate. If you go there, then we'll get connected to you in all the ways.
All right, great. Roy, thanks for sharing your story with us. I always love hearing some of your learnings, and appreciate what you do to bring others people's brands to life.
Likewise, Bob. I'm so grateful for you, and you are a great example of a personal brand. You built so much trust over a long period of time by over-delivering and adding value to people. So it's an honor to be here and be associated with you, my friend.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to the next book and we'll have you back. To our listeners, thanks for tuning into the Elevate podcast today. We'll include links to Rory and his work and the book link on the detailed episode page at robertglazer.com. If you enjoyed today's episode or the Elevate podcast in general, I also hope you'll sign up for Friday Forward if you haven't already. It's my weekly newsletter with over 100,000 subscribers that shares a little inspirational story each Friday morning. So you can join today at robertglazer.com with the Friday Forward tab on the top, or just go to Substack and look for Friday Forward. Thanks again for your support. And until next time, keep elevating.